Welcome everybody to today's session on machine learning and pharmacometrics. My name is Martin Bergstrand. I'm the MIDD Platform Science Lead at Prometheus.
So hello everyone, my name is Sjöberg Koch. I'm from the Department of Pediatric Pharmacology and Pharmacometrics at the University Children's Hospital in Basel.
We will start today's session with a tutorial, and the first, there's two speakers, and the first one is Dr. Nadia Taranova, who's the head of Advanced Data Analytics in Quantitative Pharmacology at Merck. Dr. Taranova's scientific contributions include impactful QSP, modeling of complex multivariate drug development programs, but in this session, most relevant is her experience with machine learning and pharmacometrics.
And the second speaker is Dr. Uri Nahum. Dr. Nahum received his PhD in applied mathematics from the University of Basel. He is the program head of the Master of Medical Informatics at the University of Applied Sciences of Northwestern Switzerland. And in parallel, he is working at the Children's Hospital in Basel, focusing on assistant computer diagnosis and disease understanding. And with this, let's go ahead.
Thank you very much, Martin and Gilbert. It's really our pleasure to be here today. I actually recall the first tutorial I attended Page. I think it was 2011, and it was really fascinating and amazing. So with Uri, we tried our best to bring together the two disciplines and to prepare this. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. But before jumping into the actual content of this tutorial, so let me share a bit the context and the motivations that push us to prepare this. So today we are living in a world that is becoming increasingly data-driven. And the biomedical sector, it's really no exception. Every day, a large amount of data are being generated from various sources, so clinical trial data, routine clinical practice, real-world setting, even our fitness tracking devices. And of course, this massive amount of data, it's opening the door to opportunities to advance medicine towards a more predictive, preventive, personalized, and participatory medicine, so the so-called P4 medicine. But at the same time, to get a good understanding of this data and leverage this, we actually need to have the right tools in place that can well complement more conventional, traditional statistical approaches. And AI, machine learning, deep learning are really playing a leading role here, thanks to the fact that they can mine and assess multimodal, heterogeneous, high-dimensional data and find some hidden patterns without bringing prior knowledge to the model. And this has been very well acknowledged within our scientific community, as testified by a number of publications that have been coming out over the last years about the use of AI and machine learning in drug discovery and development. And also the two recent events organized by the IQ Consortium and FDA MSRC, where there were a number of applications of AI and machine learning for quantitative modeling or precision medicine that were shared, along with some recommendations on the challenges and the opportunities that this comes with them. And recently, there's been also an FDA paper highlighting really an increasing trend into regulatory submissions, including AI machine learning analysis, to tackle a number of different problems belonging to the drug discovery and development place. So having said that, we could not have found better timing and opportunity than this page to give this tutorial. So that's the menu for today. Uri will start by giving some background on AI machine learning, opportunities and pitfalls. I will then continue with part 2 to share some successful applications of machine learning for model-informed precision medicine. So we hope that by the end of this tutorial, you will be able to provide high-level explanation of machine learning classification and regression problems, maybe describe 3 opportunities or pitfalls, at least 2 applications of AI machine learning for model-informed precision medicine. Maybe you will get so excited that when you will come back home, you will even start thinking about your own project integrating these techniques. Or maybe nothing of this is going to happen. So this means that we will not do a good job. So please stay focused and don't get distracted. And with this, I hand it over to Uri.
So thank you, Nadia, for this introduction. And I'll talk now on opportunities and pitfalls using machine learning. So just to say, I'm not a pharmacometrician. I know nobody's perfect. I'm coming from the other side. I'm coming from the AI side. You are all coming from the pharmacometrician. So I will talk about the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and you will think about your problems and pharmacometrics. So I put some opportunities and pitfalls, because every opportunity got a pitfall and every pitfall got opportunity. I have a table here that I would like to fill it up together with you. So we will go step by step. And how are we going to do that? We're going to go through an example of computer-assisted diagnosis. We have one example that we will go through, and then we will fill up the table together. What is diabetes insipidus? It's a condition characterized by large amount of urine and increased thirst. How much increased thirst? The people actually get up to 20 liters of urine per day. This is really a lot. What's happened is that the brain actually send a signal to the body, send all the water intake directly into the urine. But this extensive drinking can also come from other stuff, like psychological disorder or psychological disorder. And we would like to do a good diagnosis, because for those who got really brain problem, they got DI, diabetes insipidus, we want to say, keep on drinking. And for those who are having a psychological problem and drinking a lot, we need to say, stop drinking. And we can actually kill the patient here if we are not diagnosing correctly. The problem is that using clinical data, lab data, MRI, and indirect water deprivation test, which is a very, very unpleasant test, the medical doctor are not getting really a lot of accuracy in the diagnosis. So using all those, we get only 70% of accuracy. Just to be fair, flipping a coin will give us already 50. So this is not a lot. So we need to do something about it. But we can't blame the medical doctor for not giving a right diagnosis. Look on the map of correlations between all covariates and the final diagnosis and the covariates between themselves. This is really, really complicated. Why should I approach the problem with machine learning? Optimally, we find a mathematical function f that takes relevant covariates and inputs as inputs and outputs the probability for the patient having DI. That's the best way we can help the medical doctor. Since we do not have such function, we turn to use machine learning method. And with that, we can already have our very first item in the table, known or unknown function structure. So if I have a mathematical function that describes exactly what I want, and I'm using it for years, and I know it's working, I don't need machine learning. But if I don't, in this case, for example, of diabetes insipidus, this is a great opportunity. So we have data of 140 patients, and we would like to use machine learning method that can perform automatically the diagnosis. So I take only 98 of my patients, and I'm starting to learn, starting to look for a machine learning method, do whatever I actually want, which is a very good diagnosis. So I put everything into AutoML. AutoML are machines that giving you the best method with the best parameters for your problem, everything is done. So the machine learning is giving us, as an advice, random forest classifier with n estimator 100 and maximum depth 100. Let's look on this 98 patients that I was training on, and I see that on the diagonal, you can see the one that the machine learning method were actually classified correctly. On the off diagonal, you see those that are not correctly. So we missed only one patient. This is amazing. As simple as that. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. So Nadia, you have a little bit more time now. Wait, so you knew it, huh? Does my machine learning method generalizes? Test data. We have additional 42 patients that the machine learning algorithm was not exposed to. And then we see that we are not doing that good. So we see that we actually, it doesn't matter which patient we give our method, it says, yeah, it's positive. So that's not very good performance. Terminology alert, overfitting. An undesirable machine learning behavior that occurs when the machine learning model gives accurate prediction for training data, but not for new unseen data. So we had the data, the test data that we put on the side to see how it's actually working, and we see that we were overfitting using this method. But random forest classifier with a number of estimator 100, it's okay, but the max depth is 100. So this is, if you understand what random forest is doing, you understand this might overfit. So I want to say that we have the overfitting that is a very important point that we have to take care of, that we are not, that we have a test data on the side, that we are testing our method. And another thing that we need to talk about is the number of observations. So we need to actually see that the number of observations that we have, if I have 5 observations, I cannot use machine learning. But if I'm starting to have more patient and more patient, if I have, like in my case, 100, I have to do it very carefully. But if I have more and more data, machine learning tends to be more and more stable. So I would like now to go to MIT Technology Review, the dark secret at the heart of AI. No one really knows how the most advanced algorithms do what they do. That could be a problem. Is that really like this? So when we all seen this kind of graphs and with neurons and stuff like this, is it really such hard to understand it? Let's go to the first grade, when we all learned logistic regression. Logistic regression is a very simple, it's take the sigmoid function and try to differentiate between the group of red points to the group of orange points. But what's also really nice in the sigmoid, that it's somewhere between, blocked between 0 and 1, and give us actually probability. And that's what we are looking for. So if we look on how we can use logistic regression to predict the probability of DI, we take, just for example, 2 parameters, 2 covariates here, sodium and glucose. We could take more. And then we multiply the sodium times a number, the glucose times a number, we add something to it, and we put a sigmoid on it. This is logistic regression. And we get from this the probability of DI. Terminology alert. This thing, the sigma of z here, in machine learning terminology, that's called a neuron. It has a very fancy name, but this is what it is. And another thing, machine learning people, they don't love this plus and times, it's just 2 lines. So with that, we're still in logistic regression, but this is already a neural network. This is our very first neural network. It's got only 1 neuron, but this is a neural network. Can I have 2 neurons? Why not? What is then deep learning? So the mathematical rule says that more than 2 trees are already a forest. So I have now deep learning. I can make it as large as I want, every layer, and I can do it as large, as deep as I want. So with that, actually, we already seen that those neural networks, as an example, are not really hard to understand, and there are very fancy logistic regression methods. The benefit is that with these models, complicated interactions between covariates can be considered. Not only very shallow one, we can actually have more complicated one. Another important point is the universal approximation theorem. Any continuous function can be approximated arbitrarily well by neural network. And this is a really nice proof. If you really want to understand deep learning till the end, you can read the proof. It's not really hard to understand, but it really gives a great insight. But the fact that we can approximate any function, I can go to my diabetes insipidus problem and use an approximation of f using neural network on all those covariates to get the probability of diabetes insipidus. Another point on neural network is that at some point we are going down and down. We are training and we're going down and down in the training error. But at some point we are overfitting and we go up in the test data, which is really interesting us. We are not care how good we're doing on the training. We care how good we're doing on the test. And the error is going up. And this is important to know, but there is also a very important paper of Michael Belkin, which shows that if you're really over-parameterized, you actually can go down again. And just information about this thing. So what I'm adding is understanding the machine learning algorithm. So you are using some kind of an algorithm, understand it till the end. What is the benefit of this algorithm? Is it the right one for my data? Is it, there are some pitfalls. Is it allowing correlinearity? All those kind of stuff that you have to ask before you're using this method. The machine learning method could be also destructed by non-relevant covariates. So I would like now to take you hand in hand how I was choosing the covariates for this problem. So first, we are taking a heat map of correlation between selected covariates and the final diagnosis and in between each other. So we already see here that are 4 covariates that actually have a correlation of R squared bigger than a quarter. That makes it already very useful. We can use them. But from the other side, we see that we have some parameters or covariates that got collinearity. Some of the machine learning methods, not all of them, are sensitive to collinearity. Because I didn't want to restrict myself, I said, okay, so I see that for thyroid and adrenal, they got really strong correlation to each other. I'll drop the adrenal. And with that, I thought, I'm done. I'm going to go back to this feature selection and covariate selection, but I just want to talk quickly on in 2 slides on another concept. Human level performance. Machine learning projects tend to get very fast to human level performance. We are really in time, the accuracy and the performance of our work will go very fast to human level performance, but afterwards we will exceed human level performance, but in a very, very slow way and with a lot of work. In that case, what I did till now, what my human level performance. How can I increase the human level performance? I took to my side one of the most professional people in Europe in the diabetes insipidus, Dr. Julie Reffard, and she was helping me. And with her, integrating her knowledge into the project actually helped me really a lot. So I'll go back now to the covariate selection, and we see that she is telling me, hey, Uri, the adrenal is really, really important. You can't just ignore it because of what you said you call the collinearity. No, you can't do that. It's really important. So what we did together, we made some kind of a feature. If one of the axes, gonads, thyroid, or adrenal, is have a deficiency, we put 1, and if not, we put 0. So I integrated her knowledge into the machine learning. Oh, sorry. So after some debate, we put also sodium and glucose into the... So improving diagnosis, identifying 5 key laboratory and clinical key parameters, and we can spare unpleasant tests and the MRI. We just use just those laboratory parameter, and our machine learning algorithm reaches accuracy of 87%. This is really nice. Can we do better? Just because before I talk if we can do better, domain experts. This is really important. If only machine learning people will do the stuff, it will get to some kind of accuracy. But if we have domain experts in our project, this is really important. So for me, the key of revealing the full potential of medicine is combining those artificial intelligence with the knowledge of the medical doctor. We have another MRI parameters. Which one should I use? I have already something working. It's giving me 87%, but I can use the MRI. So I have stalk enlargement MRI, and I have bright spot MRI. The bright spot got higher correlation, but I'm not looking now for a parameter that will give me the best prediction. I'm looking for a parameter that I can use in addition to the parameters that I already got, or to the covariates that I already got, in order to improve my diagnosis. So for that, I'm going to self-explaining machine learning. And self-explaining machine learning, they are not only making they are not doing also only the classification, they also tell us how good the parameter, how important it is for the classification. And I see, for example, here the MRI bright spot was not so important, and from the other side, the MRI stalk enlargement was better. So I'm adding it into our machine learning algorithm. And this is only thanks to the complex covariate relationship that the machine learning is able to do. Nadia will talk about this again afterwards. So with that, using MRI, we can further enhance our result. Our machine learning algorithm reaches accuracy of 94% on unseen data. And this is really nice. I want to take just a short break from medicine. Let's do something fun. Let's try to distinguish between husky and wolf. This is like a classification trying to to understand when we have a husky and when we have a wolf. So there is amazing performance for this problem, and actually I think it was more than 95% of accuracy. I don't remember correctly, but this is really nice. But now, when we ask, so we see here now a wolf that predicted as husky. But when we ask the machine learning for interpretability, which regions in the image you were actually looking for in order to tell us if it's a wolf or a husky, and we see that the marked places is actually not, almost nothing is on the wolf. It's on the boundaries, on the feet on the wolf, but yeah, so something is wrong here. When we look on the images that we put into this learning, we see that exactly in those areas, almost all wolves got snow background, and all husky got a green background. So we actually thought that we can differentiate between wolf and husky, but what we're actually doing is, our machine learning is differentiating between grass and snow. So that could be funny, but it's happened also when we are trying to do machine learning on tumors. And people take in one date all the healthy, and in the other date all the people who are sick. And then we see a machine learning that focuses on the date. So we need to mitigate this bias. Interpretability is very important. Try to really understand your methods. We have started actually with this question. Modeling using machine learning. Yes, no, when? But the future is actually lying in the combination of both worlds. Machine learning is a powerful tool. Use it with care and responsibility. Don't forget all the knowledge that we acquired before machine learning was here: statistics, sensitivity analysis, explainability methods, and combine your real intelligence with the artificial intelligence. Thank you. With that, I would like to give the talk for...
Thank you very much, Uri. So let's move now to the second part of this tutorial, and in particular to some use cases highlighting how AI and machine learning can be used to advance model-informed precision medicine. So in particular, I'm going to focus on 4 main areas, let's say. First one being the use of AI and machine learning to advance our pharmacometrics workflows. Second one, to broaden the assessment of sources of variability that we do observe in patients' profiles. Machine learning can be used also to derive some metrics or signatures that can tell us a bit more about the drug and the disease. Or we can use directly machine learning to predict disease progression or clinical outcome in a mechanism-agnostic manner. What I'm not going to focus on for the sake of time is the use of machine learning for survival analysis, which has been done, and also pharmacology-informed deep learning like neural ODEs and expert neural ODEs, which are emerging in the field. But I think you will hear a bit today after this tutorial and also tomorrow. So as you all know, population model building, it's a step-by-step process towards a fit-for-purpose model. We first try to define our base model, which can represent and take the knowledge from the physiological system that we try to model. And also, this is coupled by a statistical model that can explain part of the observed variability that we do observe across patient profiles. And this is done by leveraging and assessing different structural and statistical models, and then we reach our base model. Once we have our base model, then probably you may want to do some covariate assessment to understand which factors can explain part of the observed variability. And this leads to a final model where we retain covariates on the model parameters that can be explained. But this process can be quite repetitive and time-consuming. At the same time, if you have very high-dimensional data set, your covariate assessment can be limited. So there are opportunities to apply AI and machine learning to advance this pipeline. And in fact, both sides have been explored with success. And with respect to the base model selection, actually there's been works showing that genetic algorithm can really leverage and advance our model building pipeline. Here an example of genetic algorithm integrated into monoliths, which actually show very good results in advising the best model from a library of structural and statistical models in less than a day. And I think all of you can acknowledge that this is quite amazing because this may take days or weeks depending on the prior knowledge that we have on our data. But even more impressive has been the use of neural networks to predict model parameters or to advise on whether certain model components were present or not. And in fact, the model could be, the true model could be advised in a few minutes or less than a day, which is extremely encouraging of the use of these methods. Of course, we could see that the performance was highly related to the training set, right? To which models you have represented into your training set. Then in a second paper, there's been also explorations of covariate assessment, fast screening of covariates, starting from high-dimensional data sets with AI and machine learning. And in particular, random forest, neural network, support vector machine were assessed and compared to more traditional pharmacometry approaches in terms of accuracy in the covariate selection and in a computational gain. And from a pharmacometry standpoint, was LASSO, SEM in PSN-NOMEM, and COSAC, the techniques that were considered. And here it was also impressive to see that machine learning techniques could identify the true covariates and provide results with very high accuracy comparable to the pharmacometry methods or higher, but the computational gain was really outstanding. I mean, we could get a very fast screening of covariates in a few hours or days, few hours compared to the days and weeks that was taking for pharmacometry methods. So all this speaks to the value of integrating such techniques to advance workflows and pipelines. And in fact, I think you could see that such techniques are being integrated in some of our pharmacometry softwares. So basically, we're saying that AI machine learning can be used for a fast screening of covariates and to really maximize our knowledge about the sources of variability that we do observe. And here, a real case study where machine learning could be used for the identification of prognostic and predictive factors of long-term overall survival and tumor growth dynamics in the avelumab Javelin gastric trial. So this study did not meet its primary objective of demonstrating superior survival of avelumab versus continued chemotherapy in gastric cancer patients within a maintenance setting. However, when looking at the overall survival curves, the team could observe that survival rate was higher in the avelumab arm in blue beyond the 12 months. So the question that the team had, okay, can we try to identify this patient subpopulation because these might be patients that can benefit from avelumab? So for this purpose, we developed a parametric time-to-event model for overall survival and our classical, we say, model of tumor growth dynamics. And then we use machine learning to really expand the assessment of prognostic and predictive factors. So in fact, with machine learning, we could assess 89 covariates for overall survival, 52 covariates for tumor growth dynamics, baseline and time varying. And once we got a top ranking of predictors from machine learning, we could embed and integrate this into our more traditional models. So ultimately, to assess the statistical and clinical significance of these covariates, right? Ultimately, there was no patient subpopulation that could be identified from these factors, but this was actually encouraging and reassuring the team on the decision to stop the development of avelumab in a gastric cancer patient for the post-induction setting. But also what I want to highlight is that this work was very important from a model-informed drug development point of view to show the lack of differences between Asian and non-Asian population, which is extremely important to design Asia-inclusive trials, in this case for gastric cancer, in the post-induction setting. So what we have seen is high-dimensional data, and then using machine learning to assess prognostic and predictive factors, and then follow up with more traditional methods from pharmacometry, as in this case for model-informed precision oncology, the standard paradigm where we try to explain and model relationship between the dose, the exposure of a drug, tumor growth dynamics, and overall survival. And in fact, this kind of approach is extremely important nowadays, where we see novel biomarkers coming out and emerging from our clinical trials. For example, liquid biopsy circulating tumor DNA, which comes with high dimension of mutations that are measured and taken from the blood. But also image-based radiomics, where from a lesion scan, actually there are a number of features that can be measured. And on this, last year, there was actually a talk at Page and a recent publication in CPT PSP, which showed that machine learning could be used to integrate radiomics into modeling of real-world tumor dynamics in melanoma patients. So basically, radiomics feature, they provide a quantitative description of a region of interest of a lesion. Then we can extract features related to the shape or like the texture or some statistics. And this can be done for each tumor lesion in a patient and for different time points. So there are hundreds of features per patient that are generated. And you understand that bringing these directly into our models may not make sense. It also may come with some collinearities and redundancy. And here it was quite nice to see that machine learning could provide a pre-selection of features of interest or important features that then could be assessed with more conventional modeling approaches together with the clinical covariates. So this was a small study, a proof of concept, but it was also interesting to see the relevance of these novel biomarkers, and in particular, radiomics features related to heterogeneity in tumor shape or texture be related to higher growth rate. But other than screening covariates, doing a pre-selection, actually we can derive directly some metrics or signatures that can inform our tumor progression models and overall survival models. And in this respect, I would like to share an example where it was developed a tumor metric signature of heterogeneity across lesion dynamics. So as you all know, heterogeneity is very important to consider in oncology, as it's responsible of the development of drug resistance and also the failure of many treatments. We have intratumor heterogeneity, but we have also intertumor heterogeneity, where intertumor refers to differences in lesions dynamics within the same patient or across different patients. What we do usually, despite several efforts in the field to characterize individual lesions over time, we usually look at total tumor size over time, and which is the sum of the longest diameter of all the lesions. And then here the question is whether we are missing any information when looking at total tumor size instead of considering all the lesions separately. And there are cases like our patient high here, where the total tumor size in black dashed line actually well describe the dynamics of the lesions because this behaves in a similar way. But there might be other cases like patient J, where actually the total tumor size, it's really an average and it's not representative of what's happening at the lesion level. So when we have large studies with many patients, then the question is how important is to consider the dynamics of each individual lesion when I have this large case study. What is the information loss? And for this purpose, a machine learning metric can be derived and was derived, which is CCIL, classification clustering of individual lesions, which allows, by integrating techniques from signal processing and machine learning, to provide a metric explaining the similarity between pairs of lesions. And this was successfully applied to several case studies, and here in particular, work which explore and look into more than 1,700 metastatic colorectal cancer patients, where more than 6,000 individual target lesions could be assessed. It was very interesting to see with CCIL that we had very little heterogeneity in dynamics when lesions were belonging to the same tissue or organ. But when looking and comparing lesions between organs, across organs, we could see different dynamics in 35% of the patients. Also, similar tumor heterogeneity could be seen in patients treated with cetuximab versus those not receiving cetuximab, but it was very clear that patients with KRAS mutated lesions had higher tumor heterogeneity. Also, we assess CCIL in a multivariable Cox proportional hazard model for overall survival, and we could find that this was a significant predictor of overall survival, with patients having higher tumor heterogeneity being associated with the shorter survival time. But machine learning can be used also directly to model our endpoint, right? And this can be done, in fact, in a mechanism-agnostic manner, not bringing any prior assumption to the setting. And in fact, the last use case I would like to share with you involves the use of explainable machine learning in the setting of predicting disease activity in multiple sclerosis. So the team here had a very clear and patient-focused question, which was related to understanding how we can predict in the future disease activity, what are the factors driving this prediction, because this is very relevant eventually to increase the monitoring for those patients or even plan an early treatment sequencing and switch to another treatment. So what we wanted was really trying to expand as much as possible our model building and to the factors that were available in MAVENCLAD trials. So we integrated demographics, response data, MRI, neurological assessment to then predict our disease activity endpoint, which was a composite endpoint encompassing T1 gadolinium-enhancing lesions, T2 lesions, relapse rate, 3 months EDSS progression, switch to other disease-modifying treatments. So we had really trying to model the various dimensions of multiple sclerosis. So we took a large data set, pulling 3 phase 3 clinical trials of cladribine, Clarity, Clarity Extension, and Oracle MS, where more than 1,900 patients receive placebo or cladribine 3.5 milligram per kg cumulative dose, which is the recommended dose, or the 5.25 milligram per kg higher dose, which was also assessed into these trials. We had a very large observation period of more than 6 years, and then we split our data set with 80-20% ratio by using stratified random sampling, so standard protocol. So we trained our model, machine learning model, which was a supervised model in the training set, and then we tested it on the unseen data to get unbiased estimates of the model performance. Everything was great. We had 80% accuracy, all metrics supporting us that we had a good model. But the question was, okay, how we are making this prediction? What are the factors driving this prediction, right? So to this purpose, we use then an explainable machine learning method, SHAP, Shapley Additive Explanation, which provides understanding of which factors or covariates are driving this prediction. And this is done at the local level so the individual level as well as the population level. So here, just an example of how SHAP may look like. You have a rank of covariates, and here for one model, you can see that the number of treatment weeks was really coming as important, followed by a number of MRI assessment and also age-related MS severity score and some lab values, which is great, right? We start understanding how our model is making the prediction. And this can be done also at the individual level. For each patient, you know exactly which covariates are driving your prediction towards disease activity or not disease activity. But something very nice for us, it's really that SHAP can provide also the dependence plot, where you can see the exact shape of the relationship, which is something we are very used to, right? We want to know the direction of the influence of our covariate. And here you can see for the treatment weeks, as example, where patients receiving less than 4 weeks tend to have a prediction moving towards disease activity, while those receiving 4 or more will tend, only based on treatment weeks here, to go towards no disease activity. And the 4 treatment weeks, it's actually equivalent to the recommended dose of cladribine. So I have to say that this was quite amazing to us because this shape perfectly reassembled the exposure-response relationship that we derived years earlier with the population repeated time-to-event model of qualifying relapses, where you can see on the top of the exposure-response relationship the ranges of exposures for the 3.5 milligram per kg in blue and the 5.25 milligram per kg in green. And you see that if we increase the exposure beyond the 3.5 milligram per kg, we don't gain so much in efficacy, while decreasing it will result in a drop. So here, with machine learning, no prior knowledge about the mechanism of action of our drug, no assumptions on the relationship, we are actually coming exactly to the same finding. And this was really amazing and supportive of the use of machine learning to tackle clinical pharmacology questions. So some concluding remarks. I think we have seen how AI and machine learning can be used to advance our field. They allow to mine heterogeneous, high-dimensional data. There are big opportunities out there to mine and assess novel biomarker, real-world data, digital biomarkers, and translational safety. Of course, machine learning can complement our techniques and use to inform more mechanistic modeling, but at the same time, we can use it in certain settings, even to model patient time course and clinical outcome where we don't need to bring knowledge about the mechanism or make some assumptions. And there is all a field about explainable AI and interpretability methods that can actually leverage more these techniques, as we can try to open the box, understand better the model and the results, and then increase the trust into these approaches. And of course, these come with really cross-functional collaborations and expertise, which is really key to leverage this data and identify the best analytical approach to assess a certain, address a certain question. So with this, I conclude. I thank you for your attention, and I welcome Uri on stage to take some questions with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Uri. So I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions. Please remember to introduce yourself with name and affiliation. Go ahead, Andy.
Hi, Andy Hooker from Uppsala University. Really great talk. Thanks a lot. When we're thinking about running standard clinical trials, a lot of the trials are based on randomization processes to get data where we can actually test when we have balanced data between test and treatment. And then you have all these different covariates that you're testing that aren't really randomized and testing the effects of those. So you don't really have this randomization on all of those different effects. And I know that, Nadia, at one of your last slides, you said something about these correlations don't imply causation. So I'm wondering how you guys are using these AI models when you get these predictions. Are you using them as causal predictions, or are you using them as hypothesis generating models?
No, thank you, Andy. That's a very relevant question. So with respect to covariates, balance, and stratification, I think it's our duty, as we do also in conventional approaches, to perform exploratory data analysis, right? And in fact, assessing distribution of covariates when we divide training test set, validation set, it's something we must do, right? Especially if we have some hints about certain imbalances. Then with respect to causation or hypothesis generation, I think right now it's more to generate hypotheses, right? I mean, we need to be careful how these conclusions from these models are made. In fact, I think in the field there is a lot of attention and effort right now trying to identify also some best practices. But I think it comes with this emerging field right now, at least into our specific discipline.
So maybe I want to just add, if we can have this kind of diagnosis tool, but we, in the end, our goal is to give a probability for the medical doctor in order to take the decision, help him to assist him by taking the decision and not saying, okay, the probability is very high, we say it's this sickness. So yeah. Just to add.
So it should be a risk-based approach, right? Also FDA, it's advising, it depends really on the risk associated to some results. Yeah,
we can take one more question first up.
Hello everyone, my name is Bạch Nguyễn from INSEAD Paris, France, and I have a question. Sorry. Yeah. And I have a question. Well, in fact, first of all, thank you for your very passionate and interesting presentation. And I really like to move on a little bit on the next step, because like if we consider if the model is true, like your conclusion is true, and maybe how, well, because I think of how we can reintegrate it to like ameliorate the conclusion by reinjecting the knowledge of your model and maybe new knowledge into your data to like to renew and to readapt the conclusion like drawn from your model. I asked the question because I heard of this before in other AI and machine learning, and it is possible. Well, in fact, every time you have the new conclusion and new knowledge, you can re-inject it in your old model to update it, in fact.
I think like this sounds like a very interesting discussion topic, maybe, but I think we don't have time for that, so we'll have to take it offline.
Okay.
Okay, but we are happy to answer this afterwards.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Anteri Kot. She has over a decade of experience focusing on modeling of cancer therapies with complex PBPK models for ADCs, bispecific, and T cells during her PhD to translational modeling at Pfizer and now at Takeda. And her current interest is in machine learning applications in PHARMACOMETRICS, and she will talk about do tree-based machine learning methods outperform Cox regression for progression-free survival prediction in, mobocertinib treated lung cancer patients. Thank you.
Sorry for the long title. Thank you for the introduction, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. Really exciting to be here. Oh boy, it's a little bit overwhelming. Haven't presented in person in front of so many people since the pandemic, you know. I want to thank Uri for laying down the foundation for ML, and a lot of terms he talked about, you know, you'll be hearing them in here as well. And I want to thank Nadia for bringing up one of really important work done by René Bruno. I heard he's somewhere at the page. And this work is also based on some of the work that his group has been doing. So I see that it's the end of the day, and before I lose everyone's interest, I have a whole story, but I think I will jump to the results first, switch things up a little bit, and then go back and go into the background if needed and if people are still awake. Right? I want to acknowledge first, though, this is the work that was done with 3 members from our team. Santiago, he was an intern with us last summer, and he enjoyed the work so much with us that he joined again this summer. Mike, he is the key person here because he got all the data. So in an organization, which is as big as Takeda, or many such organizations, it's very hard to get your hands on data and do any analysis with it. So he was the key person to get all the data from. And Neeraj is my boss. I want to thank him because he gave me the freedom to get the data and do whatever I wanted with it. Also the money for the intern. So let's switch gears a little bit, and I just want to jump into what we did and what was the result. So we got mobocertinib data. That's a non-small cell lung cancer drug that got approved in 11 countries, and so we have a lot of data for it sitting around. And by a lot, I mean 305 patients. That's a lot by Takeda organization or pharma standards, you know. So we divided, we got all the patient baseline characteristics in this data set. There were about 100 features. And what we wanted to do was test hypotheses with machine learning. So we wanted to predict the progression-free survival that was there in the data. And we got questions like, is baseline tumor size important? Is exposure important in the feature list? What are the important parameters? And if we don't have certain data, do you think your model will perform well? So since we had the full data set, we made 4 different subsets of data set. The first data set had the patient baseline characteristics and only had the observed baseline tumor size. The next data set had the patient baseline characteristics, and added on to it was the observed baseline tumor size and also the AUC exposure. In the third data set, instead of the AUC exposure, we used the tumor size dynamic parameters that are k-kill, k-growth, and model predicted baseline tumor size, in addition to the observed tumor size. And in our final data set, we had all of these parameters combined. So we wanted to see how the data collected throughout the study, if we have one feature versus the other, where exposure is extremely important and tumor size dynamics is always also important and collected during the study, if any of these are key to predicting progression-free survival. So without going into too much of the background right now, I want to throw out the results. So what happened here? For our baseline patient data set, that's the data set A, we saw that using Cox regression analysis and Cox regularize, which is just a different flavor of Cox, it's used when we have a lot of missing data and we want more of an accuracy around it. And we compared 4 different random forest-based methods. So gradient boosted method, extra tree methods, and XGBSE, which is extreme gradient. So it's basically just a gradient boosted on steroids. I will go into a little bit of detail on these methods if there is interest in after the results, but I want to show you is when we had the least amount of data. That means we just had the baseline patient features and the observed baseline tumor size. The model that did best was actually Cox. So machine learning did not perform really well. I mean, it performed well, it gave us the results, but was it better and was it worth investing the time in? Probably not. But as we added more data, so in the second data set, we added exposure to the baseline patient feature. And we started to see that the machine learning started to do a little bit better. So this is the best machine learning tree-based method that we used in this analysis. So that's the extreme GB, gradient boosted method. And we started to see there was slight improvement over Cox regression analysis. Oops. So we started to see that it was marginally better. When we moved to our third data set, so in this data set, instead of exposure, we have the tumor size dynamics and the patient baseline features. We saw that machine learning was doing significantly better. And so we also saw that the tumor size dynamics over the entire study somehow gave better results than just the exposure information for the data. And in our last data set, where we had everything included, our entire data set with exposure information, with all the tumor size dynamic information, and all the patient baseline features, we saw that the machine learning performed best. So with this, what we wanted to see is machine learning always worth investing in? Because it's not that easy. We have to do a lot of machine learning operations work behind the scenes before we actually get to do the analysis. Where is the data stored? Who has access to it? Where are we pulling it from to do the analysis? Do we have access to clusters? So there are a lot of questions that go into it before we actually do anything. And we wanted to see if it's worth going through months of that background work before we get to do the analysis. And what we found was if we have more data, the machine learning does improve the results and the predictions eventually. So now that I have given you the results, I want to go a little bit in the methods. And I want to talk about how many patient baseline characteristics we had. So we had about 102 patient baseline characteristics that included everything: lab results, metabolic panel, liver functions, mutation test, etc. And then for the features, if we had more than 10% missing values in certain features, we removed them. We imputed the features that had missing values for continuous. We used mean values. For categorical, we used mode values. We normalized the data. For continuous, we used x minus mean by standard deviation. For categorical, we used one-hot encoding vectors. And we handled outliers by converting them to log scale. So like I said, a lot of background work goes into doing the study. So 90% of our time went after we had received all the data to do the data processing and data visualization, transformation that we talked about. And so it included looking at this. These are representative plots. So it included looking at, okay, so my hematocrit, et cetera, are missing more than 10% of the values. We should be removing them. We looked at the histogram ways of showing the data. So what this told us was if any of these features had only one value, say the country feature on the data set was all USA, it's not going to be informative. So we removed those features like that. And then we also had to model our tumor growth dynamics. So in this study, we did not use the time-dependent data directly. We estimated the parameters first using a Stein model, which is the simplest model to estimate the tumor dynamics. And we got the growth rate, the kill rate, and the initial tumor size for it. Now, once we cleaned up all our data, we went into subsetting our data, and we performed a feature selection process. Now, I want to preface this by saying that feature selection in this case was not important at all, because you could throw in all the features, and you could run your gradient boosted methods, all the methods, and it will still predict. But because it was taking too much time on the clusters, even after so much computational power, we decided to run this first and reduce the feature space. So these are just the representative graphs for feature importance that we did using permutation importance, and then we also performed Baruta method. So anything that came out as significant or significant contributor feature, we kept those. So the feature list was significantly reduced from about 100 features to 38 to 42, depending on the data set. Now, we wanted to compare everything with Cox regression. That's a golden standard for doing survival analysis. And it's a pretty good method. It's been used for decades. It's a semi-parametric method. Everyone knows how to use this very quickly. Hazard remains the same over the time, and it only changes proportionally with predictors. So in addition to this, we only used Cox regularized method of Cox too, just to add in a better method or a variant of Cox. So just an overview of the ML methods that we use. Now, random survival forest or random forest, you might already all know, and Uri did touch upon some of it. So it's basically a bunch of decision trees, and once you have the decision trees, the results you get from it are averaged, and you get your answer there. And other trees, such as the extremely randomized trees, are just a variant or more wrapper around a randomized tree method, where instead of finding the best split point at the nodes here, it splits the data randomly, so it adds more randomness to it, and it reduces variance, reduces overfitting, but it may increase the bias. For gradient boosted trees, so it is an interesting one. Instead of independently making all the trees, it makes one tree and works on it first to make it better, to reduce the error, and then it goes on to other trees. And extremely gradient boosted survival is just another way of doing gradient boosted, but it's in steroids, so it's computationally faster, and it also adds regularization parameters for overfitting. It is better for handling missing values. So if you're in a pinch and if you want to use one method that might solve your problem, I would suggest using XGB first, and then maybe trying other methods. Chances are this would be faster and will give you the answer. So once you have all your models in place, you still have to do a few more steps before you can get to the prediction part. One is hyperparameter tuning. So there are a lot of manual parameters that you have to input in a model, such as the length of the tree, how many nodes you want to have, the number of the trees, etc. And so that's something that needs to be manually added. So now I can add 2 trees, these many nodes, blah, 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 but that's biased by my thinking, right? So you need to find an optimal hyperparameter in this, hyperparameter combination in this hyperparameter space. So we used a method called Bayesian optimization. There are 3 methods that you could pick it by. Random, so it randomly searches through the grid, and there is the grid search, which goes one by one through every single grid value or combination value. And there's Bayesian optimization, where one yellow dot you see here, and it works on it to improve. So it goes in the space where it thinks the answer might be. So once you have these hyperparameters, every combination is tested through a k-fold validation. So in this k-fold validation, you have 5 folds of data. So you separate out your test data first, then you have the whole training set. You divide them into k numbers. So in this case, 5-fold was the number we went with. And you run your model with one set of hyperparameter combination, and you store its results. So you go through all of these hyperparameter combinations and you run them so many times, and you average the answers and look at the answers. Okay, you have found your best optimal hyperparameter space. Then you use those hyperparameters to train through your entire training data set, not divided into folds, and then go with the test data sets, which gives you a score. So that's what I showed you. These scores are generated as the model performance value. Now, there are many ways to see it. C index was one of the most common ones, and Breyer score is like the difference between your predicted and your observed curves. So if Breyer score is low, that means the model is performing better. And in case of C index, if it's higher, then the model is performing better. So having said that, I already went through the results, and the conclusion is if you have more data, machine learning is performing significantly better than Cox. And with that, after our model was all trained and we did test it, what was the point of it? We did test it in different subsets of population. So we entered the population that the model had never seen before, but we had a baseline tumor size. We split the data by baseline tumor size. So
One minute.
Sorry. Okay, I'll just go to my last slide. So what we wanted to do here was predict the PFS for population that had exposure, or the AUC, higher than 500 nanogram into hour per mil and lower than 500. So what this shows us is where the patient's going to fall if their exposure is over 500, under 500. And in the dotted, you see the Kaplan-Meier's, and the solid lines are your model predictions. And we did see that the XGBSE was one of the best models to predict this. So you could feed into a new population, and it would give you the PFS predictions. And that was the whole point of training your ML models to your existing data set. And you could do this to create the results for your phase 3 or your pivotal trial, where you want to see if your drug will be successful or not. If you want to change the patient inclusion-exclusion criteria, you can change the protocol, you can change the study design to get to the most optimal result. And with that, I would like to thank you all and ready to take questions.
So I guess we have time for one question. Oh. And please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Jim Rogers, I'm at Metrum Research Group. Thanks, really nice talk. Kind of a two-part question, I guess. So if I was understanding the Kaplan-Meier curves that you showed at one point, it seemed like, I don't remember what the groups were, but it seemed like maybe it was kind of a proportional type relationships between the curves, and maybe a setting that would have favored a Cox proportional hazards. So kind of helping that method out as much as it could have been. So number one is whether you tried it on data sets that had different, maybe non-proportional treatment effects and so forth. But also, did you consider all, like, there's a lot of newer semi-parametric methods, like using Gaussian process priors and things like that. That might be another interesting, worthy competitor.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't tried any other method, any other semi-parametric methods to compare with. And with regards to the Cox, where they're non-proportional, we figured that lasso regularization with Cox might help in that case, but maybe we could try extended version of Cox. There are different flavors and variants of it too. But yeah, so far we haven't tried more methods to compare with.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the final speaker of this session is Victoria Ponsi. She received her PhD in applied mathematics from University of Heidelberg, and since 2020 she holds a position as senior pharmacometrician with AbbVie. She will present on benefits of integrating machine learning with clinical pharmacology principles to predict pharmacokinetics. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So first, I would like to thank the organizers for allowing me to talk about this topic that is very exciting for me. So this work is part of a collaboration between the Fraunhofer Institute for Algorithms and Scientific Computing and the Department of Pharmacometrics at AbbVie. So first, some disclosures. Some of the authors of the work, including myself, are employees of AbbVie, and AbbVie sponsored this work. So in the last few years, a new type of machine learning model is being explored for pharmacokinetic modeling. Before, we typically had these black box architectures that the other speakers have been talking about that just focus on artificial neural networks and recurrent neural networks. However, recently, different groups have started to explore these architectures that incorporate this mechanistic knowledge or clinical pharmacology principles. So let's look at the different methods that one can do that. So one way, the easiest, would be to add some sense of peaky causality. So the architectures that do this, they treat differently the concentration and the dose data, such that the dosing data impacts the PK data, and then if you have a PK-PD framework, then the PK influences the PD. Another method that has been introduced are ODE-based machine learning architectures. And the key architecture that does this are neural ODEs. Neural ODEs is a method to fit time series data through an ordinary differential equation whose right-hand side is a neural network. So this neural network at the end is just a composition of functions. So we have a standard ODE problem here. So there are different ways to include mechanistic knowledge in an ODE, as we all know. So first, we can deal with dosing in a standard way. We can also use this neural network architecture and include mechanistic terms. So then we can capture known mechanism with mechanistic terms and unknown mechanisms with the neural network. And since we have a neural network, it can also integrate high-dimensional and multimodal data. So now that I introduced these different methods, so what did we did in this work? In this work, we wanted to analyze the performance of a neural ODE that describes a known process through mechanistic terms and an unknown process through a neural network. We want to compare how this neural ODE, its performance compares to other machine learning architectures that also include mechanistic knowledge. So our hypothesis is the more mechanistic knowledge we put, the better the performance will be. The test scenario that we consider is to fit pharmacokinetic data of a specific drug that exhibits an atypical absorption process. So let's go through how we did this analysis. First, we created in silico data. We consider a nonlinear mixed effect model that of one compartment with a Weibull type absorption and a linear disposition. We simulated 800 subjects for 70 days and recorded every 12 hours. We assume a weekly dosing and allocated all subjects into 8 different dose groups. In order to do the model training and the model performance, we did a test-trained data split. So all our subjects was divided into training subjects and test subjects. Now, we trained all our models in records from the training subjects from day 0 until day 42, and all the other records will be used for model evaluation. So during the model training, we vary different aspects. We consider a different number of training subjects, different sample strategies for the training data set, and different error models for our nonlinear mixed effect model that created the data. The reason to do this is to analyze how these aspects affect the model performance. Now, for model evaluation, we consider different evaluation scenarios that are standard for PopPK models. For analyzing the model performance, we consider diagnostic plots and evaluation matrix, standard for machine learning. So let's look at the different architectures that we consider. First, we consider an architecture that we will refer as the Bram et al., and the author is present in this conference, so if you have any questions, please let him know. So in this architecture, what they do is that they deal with those PK data and PK data from the first cycle differently. So they consider a 2 subnetwork structure such that the impact of the first subnetwork that just consider the dose and the PK data from the first cycle impacts the PK data prediction from the other subnetwork in order to create then the model prediction of the whole model. So by doing this, a causality relationship is being encoded into the architecture. Now, the other architecture that we take into consideration is the architecture that we refer to as the Liu et al. Architecture that can be found in that publication. This consists of an encoder-decoder structure such that the dose data, the PK data from the first cycle and the PK data is encoded into an initial condition. This initial condition is then is used for an ordinary differential equation that is defined in a latent space with a neural ODE such that the right-hand side is a neural network and the dose is added in the standard way. The solution of this ODE is then decoded via a neural network in order to produce the model prediction. So an important aspect of these 2 architectures, if you can see, is that both of them, they consider the PK data from the first cycle. This means that whenever you want to predict, make model predictions for completely new subjects, these architectures cannot do that. However, you can do a small fix, which would be just not considering the part of the model that consider this first cycle. We will actually understand and see in the results what happens if you do this. Now, let me introduce the proposed architecture. So this proposed architecture, we call it the PK-SIML model. So here, we're going to have an ordinary differential equation such that the neural network term will capture the absorption process, and we will assume that the known mechanism is a linear clearance. This type of framework allows us to then deal with those in the standard way, and the most important characteristic is that allows the simultaneous estimation of the neural network parameters and the mechanistic parameters, such as clearance and volume. And just a small remark is that it does not require this PK data from the first cycle to predict new patients. So let's look at the results, and let's look to the easiest case for a machine learning model, whenever you have the most data in your training data set. So if we focus in a large data set, so 680 training subjects and a dense PK sampling, here we see the different diagnostic plots for all the models that I just presented. There is one more model, which is the model that we refer as BRAM without, and this is an adapted version of the architecture BRAM et al. That does not consider this PK data from the first cycle. Now, for both the plots of the concentration time profiles and the residual plots, there is a dashed vertical line that denotes where the time of training, when the training stopped. If we just focus at the goodness of fit plots, we can see that all models for this large data set perform well. There are slightly differences that can be seen from the residual plots after the training time, but overall, all models can be said that they behave well for this large data set. So let's look at the most opposite case, would be the most difficult for a machine learning, when we have the least amount of data. So here, for our realistic data set, so 48 training subjects and a sparse PK sampling, we can see that the model performance of all the models is quite different. So for the Liu et al. And the Bram et al. Architecture, after the training time, we can see that the error increases as the time progresses. If we now look at the Bram without model, we can see that after the training time, for all patients, for all time records, and for all doses, we have the same value predicted for all of them, which can be seen from this vertical line in the average concentration. Oh, no. Okay, no. It's okay. So we can also see it from the goodness of fit plot in that model, where there is a cluster of orange plots of orange dots at the concentration 22, around the concentration 22. In contrast, if we look at the PK-SIML model, we can see that even in this situation, when there is little data in the training data set, the model still performs well during the training and in the test data set, in the test period. Now, we have just seen the results for the extrapolation scenario, but if we actually look at all the other evaluated scenarios, we can see that the results are consistent with the previous findings. Then, an extra step is that the PK-SIML, besides producing predictions of the concentration time profiles, it can also estimate the disposition parameters. And for all the tested scenarios, for all the variations that we did when we were doing the model training, we were able to see that the predicted apparent clearance and volume were similar to the ones that were used for generating the data. So, in summary, we have shown the importance of adding mechanistic knowledge into machine learning models. We have seen that this type of architecture can produce highly accurate predictions, and by changing all the different methods and design aspects, we were able to analyze the model performance of all the different architectures. Now, this is really just a first step. There is still a lot of things to do. So some of the things that we're currently looking at is the integration of intra-individual and inter-individual variability for known and unknown mechanisms, and more complex setups, so PD models, high-dimensional data, and covariates. So I would like to just thank the rest of the authors of this work, and thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Victoria, thank you very much for the very clear presentation. We'll open up for questions. Remember to introduce yourself.
Jin from Genetech. So I guess, part of the publication that you cited, the Liu et al. Paper from our Genetech publication, I believe in that exercise, we also tested the cases of rather than using intense sampling, but sparse sampling, whether the prediction will lead to any bias. But I believe in our hands, the exercise didn't produce any systemic bias as you presented. So maybe we can follow up offline to see the details of what's the exact reason of the systemic bias you predicted. And also, one thing we learned from that exercise, these different machine learning models may be able to describe the data equivalently, but when making predictions, especially extrapolations, for example, to different regimens, not only dose levels, because dose level is the input for the machine learning, but really predicting different regimens. That's where NeuroODE outperform other methods like SSTM, because NeuroODE have built in these PK principles of dose driving exposure, driving response. Therefore, it is able to accurately predict PK profile of different regimens, where at least in our hand, the STM method couldn't fully perform that. So be curious for your method, whether you can also extrapolate between regimens as well. Thanks.
Given that we also use neural ODEs, then this also is a practical scenario that we can test. We actually did not test it for this framework. And maybe one of the differences between the model comparison that we did is that we focus on going to smaller number of training subjects. So this is the biggest difference to your analysis, if I have understood correctly. So the method presented in Liu et al. Works perfectly for 680 training subjects. But it's as we go to smaller subjects that we can see that adding more knowledge or putting some of these mechanistic terms actually benefited in the model performance.
Yep,
so maybe you two guys can discuss this
yeah,
offline.
Just one very quick comment. Yes, in the publication, we didn't include that, but internally, we did test for smaller sample size, smaller number of patients, or earlier data cut, or smaller number of data. We didn't observe that significant system bias, but maybe you can also follow up offline. Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe there's time for one more question. So is it correct that I understand that this is to be seen as a proof of concept type of exercise, and that the particular problem here with the absorption modeling is maybe not fully a realistic problem, in that this is normally not such a challenge using standard current methodology? Could you allude to some areas where you think that this could bring real big benefits when applied to
Well, actually, I don't know if it's possible to bring the slides, but if it's not, then I can just quickly comment on that. The way that we envision this type of problem or this type of architectures would be an extension to the standard pharmacometrics workflow. So we would first try to fit a PK model, and then the pharmacometrician would be able to analyze using diagnostic plots what is missing in the model. And in this missing, then they will use neural networks for these unknown mechanisms. So the idea would be to have an enhance on this, on this PK model at the end.
Thank you very much for that clear answer. I think it sounds very promising. So that concludes this session. We thank all the presenters and the audience for your attention, and remember to be back in good time for the next session. And that would be...
And I think we have an announcement, so please stay.
Apologies.
Don't worry.
Hi everyone, please stay a few minutes. This will be very brief. I'm Manuel Ibarra from the Universidad de la República in Uruguay.
My name is Darlene Santiago from University of Puerto Rico.
and we are general coordinators of RedIF, and we would like to invite you and make an announcement today for an event we will have next year. So RedIF, I don't know if you know, but stands for Ibero-American Pharmacometrics Network, and it's a society of research groups involved in pharmacometrics of those 13 different countries from different parts of Latin America, Spain and Portugal. And we have gathered since 2017 in Uruguay and different annual meetings, and we have done different activities with the common goal of promoting pharmacometrics in Latin America. Each meeting we have been gathering more attention, and we feel that we are aiding to promotion of the field in pharmacometrics with more and more participants. Last year we had a very nice meeting in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and next year we will have a meeting in another part. Yours.
Yes, so our next meeting, it's going to be held in the beautiful city of Bogota in Colombia in April 24 to the 26th. So we're inviting everyone here to please consider this meeting as a platform outside of Europe to share your pharmacometric research and initiatives with Latin America. So the first window of opportunity to submit your abstract, it's going to be in November, from November 1st to November 30th. The Congress theme is Pharmacometrics for Inclusion and Equity. So we're looking for significant contributions of power for women within pharmacometric science. Also, we're going to showcase different pharmacometric tools for studying drugs in special populations, rare and tropical diseases, and veterinary applications. And also, we'll be discussing regulatory science. So we're pleased inviting everyone to submit an abstract to this conference. Who should attend? Of course, everyone here today. We're looking for junior and senior pharmacometricians, and also in training, students can share their work and their research, pharmaceutical scientists, pharmacists, medical doctors, and everyone who's interested. Even though the Congress is going to be held in a Spanish-speaking country, Colombia, the language is going to be English, so that should not be a problem for anyone here. So you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and I think we have Twitter also, right? Yes. And also for more information, you can go into our website, and we want everyone to join us in beautiful Bogota for a joyful celebration and promotion of pharmacometrics. So thank you everyone for staying in a couple of minutes. We know we are impeding you for getting your coffee. So thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you very much.